warm welcome to you all. My name is Antje Fiedler and I'm an associate editor of the Journal of Small Business Management. Today, I have the great pleasure to talk with Professor Sylvie Chetty about her paper that explores the determinants of small firm business performance in Cuba. This paper was co-authored by her together with her colleagues Professor Julio Cerviño and Oscar Martín Martín. Sylvie Chetty is a visiting professor at the Department of Business Studies at Uppsala University in Sweden. Their paper, Impossible is Nothing, Entrepreneurship in Cuba and Small Firms Business Performance, was published in March 2024 in the Journal of Small Business Management. Sylvie, welcome, and to start with, can you please tell us where the idea for the paper came from?
Okay, thank you so much for that nice introduction, and I'm really pleased to participate in this interview. So the idea for this paper, there were different factors coming into account. So first thing we thought about is in entrepreneurship, one of the most important aspects is that entrepreneurs turn challenges into opportunities. And then we thought, okay, Cuba is one of the most challenging environments for entrepreneurs. Because if you think about Cuba, it's a communist country and it's like an oxymoron. How can you have entrepreneurs in Cuba? And then on the other hand, we also had one of our co-authors, Julio Cerviño, who was teaching in University of Havana, teaching in an MBA program. And in that program, they had to do a research project about business. So they were going out and actually talking to Cuban businesses. So we had that aspect as well, that we had this data. And another point to consider is that when you look at the literature, we identified a gap. A lot of the work on entrepreneurs is based on what comes out of Western countries or emerging markets. Whereas if you look at Cuba, it's a turbulent transition market and a very difficult environment for entrepreneurs. So if we are looking at how do they survive in such a challenging environment, how do you find opportunities there, we thought this is an ideal context to study the situation of entrepreneurs in a communist country. And we also should consider that in Cuba, they're making the transition from communism to a socialist market economy. So that is a factor to consider as well. But it's been very turbulent because one minute they encourage entrepreneurs, and then the next minute, when the entrepreneurs are becoming successful, the gap between the rich and poor is becoming wider, and they say, no, 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 now we have to stop this and tighten up entrepreneurship. So there's a lots of different points, but we thought it really will help towards understanding entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much. It's such a fascinating context, I have to say. My second question would be, what is the most interesting insights from your perspective?
Okay, so what we found was that some of the important insights are that the historical and institutional context in Cuba, that really dictates how entrepreneurs are going to emerge and how it will shape the environment. So it's been quite a turbulent transition in Cuba. One of the main issues is the supply chain problems. So the entrepreneurs, they will have to go and buy their products from the same source as their customers would. So it's state control of supplies, and it's not very stable. And the other insights we get is the impact of the US administration on entrepreneurship in Cuba. So the Obama administration opened up the markets, reduced sanctions. So you really got an influx of tourists from the US coming to Cuba. So you got this Airbnb, really opportunities for small entrepreneurs, Airbnb, taxi drivers, small restaurants, small-time tourist operators, and entrepreneurship really started to flourish and, created employment, boosted the economy. And then when the Trump administration came in, they backtracked on what Obama had done. And then the entrepreneurs really struggled. So that, that is an important insight to bear in mind, is how the US administration is going to create challenges for the Cuban entrepreneurs. So it's ironic that we say, okay, communism, and now they're trying to make the efforts to go towards a socialist market economy, but the US and policymakers want to keep Cuba back under communism, no matter how hard they try. So it is a problem for the Cuban entrepreneurs. Another issue in Cuba is how the government in Cuba creates challenges for entrepreneurs because, for instance, banks do not provide loans for entrepreneurs. So they have to rely on their family, their friends, remittances from family abroad. That's the only way they can get a loan for the business. The government also restricts the size of the business. So they want to keep it really small. They say, okay, not more than 5 employees or not more than 20 employees. So, you can't grow. If you're successful, you are restricted on the size of your business. So those are just some of the challenges, but we also found that business skills, even though the communists hated, for them, they held business skills with disdain. But even in a country like Cuba, you need to have business skills. So that is an important insight.
So interesting, Sylvie. The final question I have is, what kind of implications does your study have for managers and policymakers?
Okay, so I think the first insight to get is that entrepreneurs survive even in the most challenging environment. And then I will get back to the US administration again and say they really need to relax the sanctions with Cuba to help them make that transition, and to see that the entrepreneurs are not just working in isolation. If the entrepreneurs in Cuba succeed, they are going to shape that transition. They're going to make that move from communism to a socialist market economy much quicker. So the entrepreneurs can play an important role in that. So we also see the importance of social and family networks. So there should be like a lot of informal, and this is done on a very much informal basis, I should say. So even though you got the government in Cuba having all these restrictions at an informal level, the entrepreneurs really managed to get around all these challenges. So they could also, policymakers organize workshops, teach these entrepreneurs some improvisation skills, because the rules and regulations are changing so frequently that entrepreneurs need to be able to adapt, to be flexible, think on their feet, and teaching them some of these improvisation skills would be very useful, because they need to train to be flexible and how to adjust their resources. Now, another thing to bear in mind is that in Cuba, people have always had so little, and they would really stretch those few resources, So it's like, how do you do more with less resources? So there could be that intergenerational transfer of knowledge. Older people will know how to do this, can teach the younger ones, maybe through breakfast meetings, and share how they manage to stretch their scarce resources. So they could have some sort of informal ecosystem going on, how the universities, government, and entrepreneurs work together to see how they can improve the situation and adjust to all these supply chain shortages and challenges. And the state, the Cuban government can't just ignore their role as well. They should think about setting emergency fund when things get really difficult for entrepreneurs. And also the banking system, to think of loans and not just rely on entrepreneurs to find the things themselves. So everyone should be working together to help these entrepreneurs, so policymakers, the entrepreneurs themselves. And there are a few multinationals as well in Cuba, because I mean, at the moment, Cuba is a high unemployment, so they have these necessity entrepreneurs. So it's out of necessity that people have to go and create their own businesses. So multinationals could step in and see how they can improve their infrastructure as well. Like some of the critical issues come from water, electricity, poor road transport systems. So if everyone works together, I am sure that that would really help Cuban entrepreneurs, and we can all learn from how these people sprout in the most challenging environment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sylvie. I'm so grateful you shared these interesting insights from your paper with us. I'm sure everyone who listened now wants to read the full paper, and I just want to mention it is available at the Taylor and Francis website of the Journal of Small Business Management. Thanks again for these wonderful insights.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.